Thank you, Mr Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to follow the honourable member for East Antrim in this budget debate. I thought the Chancellor started in the right place this afternoon when he laid out the history of the last 8 or so years and recalled that when this administration came to office in 2010, there was a truly mammoth task facing the then Chancellor of the Exchequer. The budget deficit stood at almost 10% of GDP, one of the highest in Western Europe. Unemployment stood at 8% and had been rising, and economic growth, in fact there was a recession, economic growth was negative, the economy had been contracting. And the history of the last 8 years has been a slow and painstaking and methodical effort to rectify those problems which the administration inherited back in 2010. And those painstaking actions have very slowly and progressively over time yielded results, with the deficit falling now to about 2% of GDP, growth ticking along, and most importantly of all, unemployment has halved, down now to 4%. And whereas some people, when you mention this on social media, immediately reply saying, oh, these are all worthless jobs, that of course isn't true, because 80% of those jobs which have been created are full-time jobs. So those 3 million jobs are valuable jobs that are helping the people doing them out of poverty and towards prosperity. And because of this very methodical, very careful approach over the last 8 years, we have today been able to significantly increase public expenditure in a whole range of important areas. The NHS, of course, being the most important of those, with an enormous £20 billion real terms increase by 2023. But there have been other areas as well. Of course, the MOD getting £1 billion and extra money being put into universal credit. Now, let me just assure the honourable gentleman from East Antrim who spoke a moment ago what this means fiscally. What it means, according to the Resolution Foundation, who have come out after this afternoon's budget statement and said that the amount of money now being spent by the government on universal credit will exceed the amount of money that was previously being spent on the old benefits. So to anyone who is concerned about the total impact of universal credit, they should take great comfort from the fact that more money will be spent on the new system than on the old system. And Croydon, my borough, I represent Croydon South, is at the top of the list of boroughs with universal credit rollout. 43% of my constituents are now on universal, or 43% of those claiming benefits are now on universal credit. By my estimation, that's about 4,000 in my constituency. And in the last 6 months, I've had 21 individual constituency cases approach me with problems. Now, that is obviously 21 too many, but let's keep it in proportion. That's 21 cases out of about 4,000. So, yes, there is more to do. Yes, there is more to do to fine-tune it. I don't dispute that for a second, but I think it's moving firmly in the right direction. Now, the Honourable Member for Bassetlaw said in his remarks a few moments ago that he supported broad-based tax increases to pay for better public services. Now, of course, I support making sure public services are properly funded, but the way to do that isn't by increasing taxes across the board. It's by encouraging economic growth, and the proceeds of that economic growth can then fund public services. Now, of course, fairness is also important, and I know that's important to members opposite as well. So they will take comfort from the fact, as I do, that income inequality is lower now than it was in 2010, and it's almost at the record low it was in 1986. And with this increase in the national minimum wage, up to £8.21 next April, that is a 38% increase over 2010, when it was only £5.93. And when you take into account the increase in the personal allowance, the post-tax income for someone working full-time on the national minimum wage is actually 44% up against 2010. And inflation over that period, cumulatively, has been around about 25%. So I'm very proud of the fact that it's a Conservative government who have been doing this to help people on the lowest incomes improve their prosperity, even after accounting for inflation. Now, I'd also just say to all members opposite that they often measure a government's success or a government's compassion by the amount of money they spend in total. And of course it's important to make sure public services are properly funded. Of course it is. But what actually matters are outcomes, not simply the amount of money you spend. So when you look at education, for example, we see that now 86% of children are at good and outstanding schools compared to 68% previously. That is the most important statistic, that children are getting better education. Of course, we've got to fund schools properly, but it's the quality of education which ultimately matters. And I would just say to the SNP, or to their, I think, last remaining member in the chamber, they criticised our plans for leaving the European Union. Of course, I hope we get a good free trade deal. But the most important market for Scotland is the rest of the United Kingdom. And 61% of Scotland's exports that leave Scottish borders, 61% go to the rest of the United Kingdom, 23% go outside the European Union, and 17% go to the EU, excluding the UK. So Scotland's most important market by far is the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, there was a lot more I wanted to say about various specific measures. I have to save those for another time, owing to the restrictions on time. I can see the opposition are disappointed, but I support the measures taken in this budget, and I encourage the Chancellor to continue with them.
Maria Eagle.